What happens when society collapses in a single horrifying night? Imagine being trapped in a house, strangers by your side, as the dead rise and the living become just as dangerous. Night of the Living Dead didn't just change the rules of horror, it obliterated them. It's raw, it's relentless. It's a masterpiece that dares to ask, who are the real monsters? This film didn't just scare audiences, it reflected the chaos and paranoia of the 1960s, making it one of the most daring and unforgettable pieces of cinema ever. Ready to relive the terror? Welcome to Rewind and Review, where we dive deep into the films that have shaped cinema history. Today we're tackling George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, a groundbreaking horror classic that's as terrifying now as it was in 1968. This isn't just a movie about zombies, it's a gritty, gut-wrenching exploration of human nature under pressure. Legendary filmmaker Quentin Tarantino once called it one of the most important films ever made, not just in horror, but in cinema as a whole. Why? Because Night of the Living Dead redefined what a horror movie could be. Shot on a shoestring budget, it's a masterclass in tension, suspense, and sheer cinematic bravery. But this film isn't just about scares. Beneath the terror lies a deeper message. Released during a time of political unrest, Night of the Living Dead mirrors the social anxieties of its era. It forces us to confront issues of race, power, and survival in a way few films dared to at the time. In this recap, we'll walk you through the unforgettable story, highlighting the suspense, the shocking moments, and the cultural impact that made this film a legend. We'll uncover why it still resonates today and explore how Romero's use of a diverse cast and bold storytelling choices cemented its legacy. So, sit tight, dim the lights, and get ready to revisit the nightmare that birthed the modern zombie genre. Because once you enter this world, there's no turning back. The story begins with an eerie quietness that sets the stage for terror. Siblings Barbara and Johnny are driving down a desolate rural road, their destination, a lonely cemetery to visit their father's grave. As they approach, the atmosphere grows tense. The overcast sky and the lack of life around them create an unsettling tone. Johnny teases Barbara with tales of graveyard ghouls, muttering the now iconic line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." But what starts as playful banter takes a sinister turn. A shambling figure appears in the distance. The man, pale, menacing, and moving with an unnatural gait, suddenly lunges at Barbara without warning. Johnny, initially dismissive, springs into action to defend his sister. In a tragic turn, Johnny is overpowered and thrown to the ground, his head striking a gravestone with a sickening thud. Panic-stricken, she sprints to their car, but there's no key. The zombie relentlessly pursues her, its decaying hand smashing through the window. Desperate and trembling, Barbara shifts the car into neutral, coasting down the hill as the monster claws at her from behind. The tension is palpable, but safety isn't on her side. The car lurches to a stop, forcing Barbara to flee into the surrounding woods. The branches scratch her arms, and the dimming light of day makes the forest feel alive with unseen horrors. Her breath comes in gasps as she stumbles upon an isolated farmhouse, her only hope for survival. The house is eerily silent, its interior a snapshot of a life abruptly interrupted. Furniture is overturned, and the air is thick with unease. Barbara frantically searches for safety, locking doors and barricading windows, but her panic only grows as she discovers signs that she's not alone. This opening sequence masterfully draws us into a world where the dead walk and the living are their prey. It's not just about the horror of zombies, it's about isolation, fear, and the lengths one must go to survive. Barbara sees a phone and tries to call for help. Her trembling hands grasp the phone, desperate to call for help. But the line is dead, and her isolation deepens as shadows of the undead creep closer. The tension is palpable. Alone in this hostile world, Barbara's fear is almost tangible, pulling us into her spiraling despair. As the dead inch closer, salvation, or what seems to be salvation, arrives in the form of Ben. played with grit and determination by Dwayne Jones, Ben bursts onto the scene with an air of quiet authority. Barbara, frozen in shock, can barely react as he assesses the situation with calm efficiency. He speaks with urgency, but his voice carries reassurance, a stark contrast to her disoriented state. While Barbara retreats into herself, Ben takes charge. A horde of zombies surrounds the house, their grotesque forms illuminated by the moonlight. Armed with a tire iron, Ben fights with primal intensity, bashing through the encroaching threat. His every move is a desperate bid to survive, to protect, and to hold on to hope. The audience can't help but root for him as he becomes the film's unlikely hero. As the chaos outside grows, Ben barricades the doors and windows, knowing time is running out. His mind races with plans. Fuel for the truck outside could be their key to escape, but it's no easy task. The undead are everywhere, groaning with insatiable hunger. Each zombie Ben takes down feels like a small victory, yet the sheer numbers remind us of the impossible odds. The growing connection between Ben and Barbara adds depth to the horror. Her fear and fragility contrast with his determination and strength, but even he cannot ignore the weight of their bleak reality. This isn't just a battle against the undead, it's a fight for humanity itself. The air is thick with dread as Ben boards up the windows and doors, turning the house into a makeshift fortress. Each hammer strike echoes the tension building outside as the undead approach. Ben's determination fuels him. The barricades are only temporary, but it's all they've got. Meanwhile, Barbara, played by Judith O'Dea, is in a state of shock. Overwhelmed by the horror, she's unable to move or think clearly, paralyzed by fear. It's heartbreaking to watch as she relives the terror of losing her brother. But it's in these moments that Ben must take control for survival. As the situation worsens, Barbara breaks down further, screaming and panicking. In a desperate, hard decision, Ben delivers a shocking blow, a punch to Barbara's face, knocking her unconscious. His cold, calculated action stuns us, but Ben knows that survival requires them both to stay focused. This moment shows the devastating cost of fear and survival instincts in a world where the living are just as dangerous as the dead. As night falls, the danger intensifies, and Ben knows he has to act fast to secure the house. He steps outside and begins to set fire to the furniture, creating a makeshift barrier to keep the zombies at bay. The flames dance in the darkness, casting an eerie glow on the faces of the undead, who are drawn to the light like moths. Ben, determined and resourceful, watches as the fire takes hold. He knows it's a temporary solution, but it's the only option he has to keep the horde at a distance. Barbara wakes up. Earlier, Ben knocked her out to stop her from spiraling into panic, but now something's different. Barbara isn't herself. As the night drags on, Ben scavenges the house for weapons. His eyes lock onto a rifle. He knows the zombies are closing in, and every moment could be their last. Her once frantic demeanor is replaced by a detached calm, almost like she's teetering on the edge of reality. Her eyes stare blankly into the room, haunted by the horrors she's witnessed. It's not just fear anymore, it's trauma taking hold. Barbara's transformation mirrors the psychological toll of survival. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ben takes on a grim but necessary task. He moves the lifeless bodies that litter the house. Ben isn't alone in the house. As the story unfolds, we learn that there are more survivors hiding in the basement. Harry and Ben are the first two to show themselves. Their presence creates an unsettling dynamic between the characters. From the moment Ben and Harry meet, there's immediate tension, with both men having differing views on how to survive. Harry, always anxious and suspicious, believes the basement is the safest place to be. But Ben, ever the pragmatist, sees the basement as a trap. It's too small, too vulnerable. He knows that if the house is overrun, there will be no escape down there. As the tension builds, Ben becomes more insistent on taking action. Harry, on the other hand, is desperate to keep everyone safe, convinced that the best option is to remain hidden, away from the horror that's sweeping the world outside. Their disagreements come to a head when they argue about the best way to protect themselves. Ben believes in fighting back, taking the offensive, while Harry prefers a more passive, defensive approach. Things shake up as the group are quickly reminded of the dangers that lurk outside, when Ben walks closely past the window and suddenly, multiple zombies grab hold of Ben, and try to seize him through the barricade. Ben uses his rifle and fires his first shot, hitting a zombie square in the chest. The ghoul stumbles but remains upright, its dead eyes locked on him. Panic creeps into Ben's usually composed demeanor. He takes another shot, aiming for the head, and this time the zombie collapses instantly. A grim realization dawns on Ben. It's the head, he mutters. You've got to destroy the brain. This revelation becomes their sole weapon against the relentless dead. The group now understands the stakes. Every miss, every moment of hesitation could mean death, or worse. Downstairs, tensions boil over as Harry Cooper insists that the safest course of action is to barricade himself, his wife Helen, and their sick daughter Karen in the basement. Harry's fear is palpable, but his selfishness alienates him from the others. Up here, we can see them coming, Ben argues, his voice firm with logic. But Harry refuses to listen, convinced the cellar is their only chance for survival. He slams the door shut, isolating himself and his family. However, as the zombie horde grows louder and stronger, Harry's plan begins to crumble. The banging on the house intensifies, each thud a harbinger of doom. Realizing the basement won't hold forever, Harry reluctantly opens the door, rejoining the others upstairs. The fragile alliance between him and Ben adds a layer of tension that simmers dangerously as they face the undead together. In the dimly lit living room, Harry's wife Helen finally emerges from the basement, a place she had retreated to for safety but also isolation. She steps cautiously into the tense atmosphere, where the group's survival strategies are already fraying. Barbara is withdrawn, Ben is resolute, and Harry is as combative as ever. Helen, however, tries to bridge the widening rift. With quiet determination, she attempts to mingle with the others, offering calm suggestions amidst the chaos. The lifeline of television. Amidst the chaos, the group discovers an old television. The small glimmer of hope pulls them together as they scramble to power it up. When the screen flickers to life, a news broadcast fills the room. The anchor's voice is grave, delivering chilling updates on the unfolding crisis. The bodies of the recently dead are returning to life, he reports, his tone laced with disbelief. The broadcast warns viewers to avoid the undead at all costs and to aim for the head if confronted. The group listens intently as the anchor mentions evacuation points, safe zones where survivors can regroup. The information is a lifeline, but getting there seems nearly impossible with the ravenous hordes surrounding the house. The news shifts to an on-the-ground interview with a government official. The reporter, standing on a dimly lit street, demands answers. What's causing this, he asks. The official, overwhelmed and defensive, can only offer vague explanations about radiation from a returning Venus probe. The lack of clarity heightens the group's desperation, leaving them with more questions than answers. Ben, ever the pragmatic leader, suggests a daring plan. Fuel up the truck outside and make a break for safety. It's dangerous, but staying put means certain death. Harry, always quick to criticize but slow to act, hesitates. He positions himself as the house's defender, armed with Molotov cocktails. While he and Ben clash over leadership, Tom steps forward, determined to help. His girlfriend Judy, though visibly scared, supports his decision. Together, the group agrees. Harry will man the upstairs window with petrol bombs, while Ben, Tom, and the truck face the chaos outside. The pressure is palpable. Every sound, every shadow outside the farmhouse heightens the tension. Harry, brimming with frustration and fear, grabs the stash of Molotov cocktails and makes his way upstairs. He opens the upstairs window. His face is a mix of terror and resolve, a man caught between his fear of the undead and his responsibility to protect those inside. He strikes a match, igniting the ragged ends of the makeshift bombs. One by one, he hurls them out into the dark, a defiant blaze cutting through the night. The bottles shatter on the ground, erupting into flames. The undead recoil, their grotesque forms lit by the fire's glow. Downstairs, Ben and Tom spring into action. Every second counts as the inferno outside momentarily thin the ranks of the advancing horde. But as they head out the door, Judy panics. Her fear for Tom's safety overwhelms her, and she bolts outside, unwilling to let him face the horrors alone. Now, the three of them race to the truck. The groans of the undead grow louder, their outstretched arms clawing at the air. Judy climbs in, her eyes wide with terror. while Ben rides on the truck bed, ready for anything. Their target, the petrol pump just a few yards away. They race and fight the horde of zombies that get in their way over to the fuel pump. The truck screeches to a halt and Tom leaps out to handle the pump. But, in his haste, disaster strikes. The nozzle slips, dousing the vehicle in gasoline. Ben yells a warning, but it's too late. A stray spark ignites the fuel, and flames engulf the truck. Judy screams as the inferno intensifies. Tom scrambles to control the situation, but panic consumes him. The truck is now a death trap. Before either of them can escape, the vehicle explodes in a deafening burst of fire and smoke. Ben, shocked by what's happened, watches in horror. His allies are gone, consumed by flame and fate. The fire's glow attracts the zombies, who descend on the scene like moths to a flame. Ben's focus sharpens. Survival is his only option now. Racing through the dark, he dodges the grasping hands of the undead, his breath ragged but determined. Finally, he reaches the farmhouse door and pounds desperately. Inside, Harry hesitates, paralyzed by fear and selfishness. The seconds feel like hours as Ben's shouts grow more frantic. But Harry hesitates, torn between his cowardice and a chance to prove himself useful. At last, he relents and helps Ben to barricade the main door. Once inside, Ben's rage explodes. Without hesitation, he punches Harry square in the face, a visceral release of frustration and betrayal. "You almost got me killed," Ben shouts, his voice filled with fury and exhaustion. Outside, the grotesque feast continues, the undead savoring every morsel of their gruesome prize. It's a visceral, haunting depiction of humanity's fragility in the face of unrelenting horror. The camera lingers on the charred remains of Tom and Judy, their flesh torn apart by ravenous ghouls. It's a haunting moment, both horrifying and tragic. Harry, already at odds with Ben, seizes the moment to push for retreat into the basement, a suggestion Ben vehemently opposes. The room fills with heated arguments as Karen's worsening condition looms over them, a silent reminder of their dwindling options. Yet, amidst the chaos, Ben fights to keep the group focused. His resilience becomes a beacon, urging them to stand firm against the encroaching horrors. As the undead press against the barricades, the farmhouse becomes a haunting stage for human conflict and survival. Amid the chaos, the group gathers around a flickering television. The news broadcast delivers grim updates. The strange, reanimated corpses are spreading rapidly, consuming anyone in their path. Yet, there's a shred of hope. The report mentions teams of armed police and vigilantes sweeping the area, hunting down the undead and rescuing survivors. The group clings to this sliver of optimism, but it's clear that their time is running out. The moans of the undead grow louder, their numbers swelling as they press against the fragile barricades. The turning point comes when the makeshift defenses fail. The zombies break through the boarded-up windows and doors, flooding into the house like a relentless tide. Panic ensues. Harry tries to wrest control of the situation, but his cowardice and selfishness finally push Ben to the edge. In a heated confrontation, Ben shoots Harry in a desperate act of self-preservation. Harry stumbles down to the basement, gravely wounded, but the nightmare doesn't end there. Harry's young daughter, Karen, who had been lying unconscious in the basement after a zombie bite, awakens, no longer a little girl, but one of the undead. The barricaded farmhouse is under relentless siege. Suddenly, the zombies outside find a weak point in the barricades. Their cold, lifeless hands break through. In a horrifying scene, Karen devours her father, her teeth tearing into his flesh. Helen, hearing the commotion, rushes downstairs only to find her daughter's monstrous transformation. Paralyzed with grief and horror, Helen succumbs to Karen's attack, killed by her own child. Upstairs, Barbara is forced to confront her past in the most horrifying way imaginable. Amid the chaos, she spots her brother, Johnny, now a zombie, among the invading horde. The sight freezes her, and she's overwhelmed by memories of the night that started it all. Johnny reaches for her, and the other zombies quickly close in. Barbara, unable to resist, is dragged into the sea of undead. Her screams echo through the house as she is consumed. With the house overrun, Ben retreats to the basement, the only safe place left. Ben retreats to the basement, the last refuge against the relentless zombie onslaught. Exhausted but resolute, he quickly reinforces the barricades. Above ground, the zombies have broken through. The house, once a fragile sanctuary, is now overrun by the living dead. Their grotesque figures swarm the rooms, overturning furniture and smashing windows. The haunting imagery of the ravenous horde reminds us why this film is a horror legend. But the safety is short-lived. Harry, now reanimated as a zombie, lunges at Ben. In a grim twist of fate, Ben is forced to kill Harry again, putting a final end to the man who had caused so much division within the group. Helen too rises as one of the undead, and Ben puts her down, his resolve hardened by the grim reality of survival. Locked in the basement, Ben waits. The sounds of the undead shuffling above him fill the air. As dawn breaks, a quiet settles over the area. The sweeping teams of armed men, police officers and barking dogs push closer, determined to exterminate the undead. The grim-faced posse cutting through the countryside moves methodically, gunshots echoing in the distance. Relief seems within reach. Inside the basement, Ben cautiously climbs the stairs, peeking out to assess the situation. But what should have been salvation turns into tragedy. Mistaking Ben for one of the undead, the search team fires without hesitation. A single bullet ends his life. Ben collapses, another victim of the horrifying events. His lifeless body is unceremoniously dragged out of the house and tossed onto a burning pile of corpses, a devastating reminder of humanity's failure to see beyond fear. And there you have it, the haunting tale of Night of the Living Dead, a film that changed everything, not just in horror, but in American cinema as a whole. Released in 1968, during one of the most turbulent times in US history, this groundbreaking film landed amid racial tensions and societal upheaval. Just months after the tragic assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., George A. Romero made the bold choice to cast Dwayne Jones, an African-American actor, as the lead, a rarity in that era, and especially in horror films. Jones's portrayal of Ben was powerful and unapologetic, challenging racial stereotypes and standing as a quiet act of rebellion against the injustices of the time. The film's harrowing conclusion, where Ben survives the night only to face an unjust and tragic end, felt like a chilling reflection of the real-world struggles Black Americans faced. It was controversial, provocative, and ahead of its time. Yet Night of the Living Dead wasn't just a social commentary, it was a cinematic revolution. Made on a shoestring budget of just $114,000, Romero's masterpiece proved that you don't need millions to make a film that resonates for decades. Its raw, gritty style, innovative use of gore, and relentless tension didn't just terrify audiences, it rewrote the rules of horror. Today, Night of the Living Dead is hailed not only as one of the greatest horror films ever made, but also as one of the greatest films of all time. It set the standard for the zombie genre and inspired countless filmmakers to push boundaries and tell daring stories. If you've enjoyed this dive into one of horror's most iconic films, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a recap. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below about what this film means to you. Thanks for watching Rewind and Review, where we bring the classics back to life. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stories that define cinema.